Everybody doing today? Okay, so my name is Rich Jester. As she mentioned, I am a program manager for JP Morgan Chase. So I primarily focus in an area of the legal department called outside counsel engagement. So in short, my job is to use AI and technology to pay lawyers as little money as possible and preferably replace them with robots when at all possible. So I'm coming at this from the point of view of someone who has spent a career in automation. My career, I am what is called a non-traditional technologist. What does that mean? If those of you did not get up in the morning today and live to code, I'm like you. I did not get up. I did not one of those people that went to school for computer engineering. My undergraduate is actually in English with a focus on editing and composition. And you'll find out a little bit later how that's actually helped me a lot when it comes to using things like large language models. I also have an MBA and an MMS from Goldie Beacon College. In addition to serving as the program manager for in the legal department at JP Morgan, I serve as the secretary for the Delaware Artificial Intelligence Commission. I also serve as a member of the Governor's Council called the Delaware Advisory Council for Career and Technology Education. So if those of you who are familiar with all of our vocational trades, electrician, plumber, programming, all of that, I go into the schools with other members of the council and make sure the schools are getting the funding they're supposed to be getting from the state of Delaware and make sure they have what they need to teach their courses. So I'm coming at this from a private sector point of view, but someone who spends a lot of time trying to help public sector, especially in the areas of education. As someone who spent their entire career essentially automating jobs, I consider it my mission to help the next generation pursue careers that are at least resistant to automation, if not automation proof. And that starts with talking frankly about topics like we're going to be talking about today. I'm extremely happy that our sponsor for this series is the Delaware Department of Labor. So Delaware AI Commission is currently just a task force. Eventually we're hoping it forms into some formal agency, but it just started up less than 2 years ago. So we're just getting off the ground, and this is one of the things that we're reaching out in the community to find out what you need. There's also going to be other training opportunities as well. I'll mention that as we go through. We're working on getting some Grow with Google free certificates so that people who want to can basically complete a form with their email address, and we can give them free access to a lot of paid training that for certificates and things like that too. So that's something that we're working on at the Department of Labor as well. This is kind of me in a nutshell. Again, I'm very passionate about career and technology education. When I was growing up, our idea of CTE and after school club was just school store. That was it. You didn't really get to compete. You didn't really do presentations. You didn't have a place to go test entrepreneurship, any of that stuff. So for the past 10 years, I've served on the board of directors for Delaware's Business Professionals of America. So if you have kids, grandkids, and BPA, odds are I probably judged or helped some of their kids get to nationals. So it's there's over 1,200 kids statewide. BPA is the nation's #1 business and technology CTSO. So a lot of what I've learned in teaching prompting essentials has come from teaching students first, and then learning from them as well as learning from my peers. As I mentioned, I'm on the Delaware AI Commission. Here's a couple snapshots from just events that we've done, around knowledge transfer and stuff like that. I've been at JP Morgan now for about 12 years. Before that, I spent about 8 years at Citibank. So my first job was testing the most boring software imaginable, back when it was still green screens, and you had to actually do software testing with that. So I am very happy now that there are automated testing tools and things like that, and I no longer have to stare at green text all day long. So what are we going to talk about today? Again, the goal of this is you're going to get about 20 minutes of lecture from me. Nobody likes to hear other people talk, unless you're apparently Gen Z who loves to hear people talk. But we're going to focus not just on the concepts, but a lot of today is going to be set on demonstration. I'm going to show you at least 4 different AI tools today in various different contexts, and I'm going to show you prompting methods for each one of those. And then normally I'm going to leave Q&A for the end, but as this is a essentials class, if you want to raise your hand and stop me as we go through, I can stop and I can answer questions as we go through. Because a lot of these things that I'm going to show you today can be applied regardless of what type of task you're performing, whether it's images or video or text generation. I'm going to give you pointers that work in all of those different areas. We have, as we mentioned, we have 3 other sessions scheduled after this. We are looking to schedule, if we get feedback from the public that this is beneficial and this is something we want to continue, we're going to continue with more classes. We've talked about AI in manufacturing, as well as doing potential just one class devoted to ethics and privacy, talking about that as well. So if you have ideas as you're going through that you'd like to hear about in future classes, please let me know. Our next session is going to be at Route 9 Library. I'm going to be fortunate to have someone from a company called OmniSpeech joining us. OmniSpeech actually developed a Zoom app that does AI deepfake detection. So when someone is using fake audio or fake video on a Zoom call, it can actually detect it in real time and notify the person running the meeting that they should be ejected. So you're going to get a demo of that and some other cool stuff in the next meeting. I'm hoping to get more Delaware companies involved with this as we go through. So when we go into small businesses, you're hopefully going to hear from small business owners that are using AI every day, how they're using it so that you can then figure out how you need to use it for your life. And lastly, again, this is for the public. Right? This is part of an initiative led by the AI Commission to educate the public on AI. So I'll be showing this QR code multiple times throughout today, but please, please give us feedback. If you really hate the sound of my voice and it's really grinding on your ears, please tell me. If you find any of the visuals helpful, if you think I went on too long about a particular subject, say so. I really want to make this engaging, fun, entertaining, but mostly I want people to be informed about what's going on, because this is a rapidly changing landscape of products, services, and technologies, and it's a part-time job just to keep up with everything that's going on in AI. So we'll go ahead and start off initially here with some key concepts in AI. So I want to give you a 30,000-foot view of artificial intelligence. So the word AI kind of gets thrown around a lot. You even hear Gen Z now saying, I can AI that. Is actually using it as a verb now, not just as a noun. So when we think about artificial intelligence, what it really encompasses is an entire field dedicated to one goal, which is making machines capable of performing tasks that would normally require human intelligence. So machine learning is part of AI. Natural language processing, part of AI. Computer vision, large language models, generative AI, all part of AI. Now that does not mean that things that you see in your everyday life. Like a good example would be on Netflix, where we have what's called a recommendation engine. That's using something called deep learning. That is AI, but it's also a form of machine learning. So the best way to look at it is AI is an umbrella term that includes a lot of other techniques, technologies, and methods for essentially using computers and machines to mimic human intelligence. And I use the word mimic on purpose, because it's important to understand that these are not like Terminator. This is not, the things that you see on sci-fi. While there are some scary aspects to this, we're not close to artificial general intelligence yet, where you have one brain that can form every task. Right now, it takes many, many, many models to do just 50% of what the average human brain can do. And the more you get into deeper experience things, the harder it is. Because again, in order to train an AI, you have to have data. And if the data's bad, the training's bad. If the training's bad, the results are bad. And I'm going to go ahead and just preface this by saying my preference for AI changes every single day with every single change or model change that they do. Because each one of these essentially because essentially when I go through and I talk about each one of these large language models, you'll learn some of them are good at certain things, and every time they tweak it, it's like a whole new release. So you can it's like basically imagine installing a software update to your brain, and that may or may not impact all of the underlying subroutines and everything else in your brain. So that's why it's not uncommon for you to hear about some AI companies releasing their new version, and then 2 days later, they are literally just getting roasted on social media for how bad it is. Because they updated it They added a new training set. Let's see what happens. And this, we're going to get into a lot of the realities of AI. Because it changes, what you developed yesterday might work differently today. You have not touched anything. You have not done anything different. But that prompt you wrote yesterday might run differently today because they've changed the model. It's important to understand that and to say, no, you are not crazy. The model probably just changed. Okay? It's an important concept to understand, especially when we talk about something a little bit later on, which are hallucinations, which are how you can tell when the AI screws up, when it makes mistakes. And we'll cover that too. Does this all make sense? So natural language processing, when you push a button on your remote to talk to it, that's NLP. Natural language processing is also extracting text from a video. It's also turning actual voice into text back, whichever way, whether it's converting text to audio or vice versa, that's natural language processing. Robotic process automation is really what preceded what's called AI agents. Now we have a whole separate session later on designed specifically for AI agents, where we're going to talk about assistance and how to do that today. I'm not going to get into that today because that's a little advanced. You need to learn how to use one tool before you learn how to string them together and use agents. So here's my big picture. If you do not take away anything else from today, I hope you take this away, okay? The easiest way to think about AI in terms of what is it is the generative AI is the tool or interface, and the large language model or the model, you'll hear me keep saying the word the model over and over again, is the actual data set that it was trained on. So from a conceptual point of view, think about this as the brain or the engine that's running. So I like to say, you don't need a Porsche Cayenne to go grocery shopping. It's very nice, but you really just need 2 legs and a bag. And that's all you really need to go grocery shopping. How fast do you want to get there? How much do you want to carry? How quickly do you want to get back? And how smooth do you want the ride to be? That's why you pay for the Porsche. Same thing happens with AI models the way that they are, in the sense that each model, so Google builds a model, OpenAI builds a model, Anthropic, which is run by Jeff Bezos of Amazon, builds a model. They're all using the internet, but they're not using the internet the same way. So whereas Anthropic has everything on Amazon to train on, Google has everything Google to train on. Meta just has Facebook and Instagram and all of those. So you can start to see, while some might be good at pop culture, might be good at mild creativity, deep analysis, it fails completely. Because it's all about what it was trained on. So if you're going to haul an 18-wheeler, you're not going to pick a 4-cylinder engine. You're going to pick, a V8, V12, something like that, to get you up that hill. It's important to right size it, because this is where we get into the cost of AI and why we want people to keep making smaller and smaller models, not just bigger and bigger ones. You want something that can run off a watch battery. You want something that can run off a desktop. You can right size these models so they don't need an entire data center to run them. And some of the models that we talk about today are designed with that in fact, where you have companies like Google and OpenAI are building giant models. You also have Google's building very lightweight models so that they can start put them inside of devices and things like that too. But again, the bottom line is the AI is the tool or interface. So when you hear me say the word AI, I'm always going to be referring to how you interact with it or the underlying component of it. And when I talk about the model, I'm talking about the engine or the brain that's driving everything. And that'll make a little bit more sense as we go through. Does this all make sense? Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and talk through some of the most popular or most common things you've probably heard about in the media. First is obviously ChatGPT. It was the original, built by OpenAI, originally designed to be a nonprofit that will be going profit later this year, which is interesting. And ChatGPT is an interesting beast because it was really good initially, and then it got a lot better, and then it tanked. And then Google and Gemini have caught up since that. Google's caught up, Claude's caught up as a result of, because what happens is it's very much a refinement process when you build these models. So just because you're the first one out and you're the guy who can do the most things, doesn't mean you can do the most things right, doesn't mean you can do the most things correctly. It also doesn't mean that you'll still be able to do the right things a year from now too. One of my biggest problems is trying to build agents with ChatGPT. When they make an update, I have to rewrite my agent because it doesn't work anymore. Or it produces a slightly different output that doesn't then fit into the next stage that I need to run for my AI agent that I'm designing. So every time there's a model change, you have to go back and you've got to validate everything over again. ChatGPT can do image. So when you see ChatGPT, the app actually has a bunch of underlying models related to that. So Sora, for example, is their video generation model. So when you tell ChatGPT, create a video for me, it's not calling ChatGPT, it's calling Sora to generate that video. It's a different model trained on a different set of data to generate video. And you don't see this a lot of times when you're in these apps. I mean, you can click on a little drop down and get it to explain it to you while it's thinking, but most of the time it's picking its models. So and depending on which tier you are, is which models you have access. So in OpenAI, and you go to the regular OpenAI site, and you don't log in, you're gonna have basic, maybe you'll get 5 prompts before it tells you to log in and pay. And then you'll have another tier, which then will give you up to 100 a day. Well, let's say those 100 prompts actually use the resources of 1,000 prompts. Well, maybe you need to upgrade to another tier beyond that because you're processing stuff on a daily basis. Maybe you're a middle-level business, or you're a data analytics company, and you're constantly crushing data. That's how these things are tiered. So, and you would hope that when the model is trying to choose which one to solve your problem, it picks the cheapest option. That's what you hope. That's not always what happens. So sometimes what you'll notice is when you're running it on the default version, it might take a long time, stop it, and I'll show you these things as we're doing a demo, but you can stop the run and you can pick a different model and try to run it in a different one to get a quicker result. With image generation and video generation, it can take a long time after you enter in a prompt for this to come up. It takes several minutes, sometimes 10, 20 minutes, depending on what you're trying to render. And if you're not using a paid service, you may shoot your entire allotted usage for one day in 2 prompts. That's why there's a process for it. It's also one of the reasons why at the AI Commission level, I'm pushing for the state of Delaware to create their own interface and make it available for all K through 12 teachers and students. So that instead of having each one of these vendors chasing after your school district for money, it's done at the state level. The tools are provided, distributed, and we know for sure that eSchool or Magic School or any of those companies aren't reading the data that we're putting in about our kids into an AI. So it's one of the things that I'm advocating for, and that's actually what's called an AI aggregator approach. So how many in this room have heard of something called Perplexity? Okay, have you actually tried Perplexity? Raise your hand. Perplexity is a unique tool among this because it's what's called an AI aggregator. What does that mean? You buy one tool, you have access to 5+ models. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini 1, Gemini 2, and then it can also access Grok, and they have their own Perplexity models. In my line of work in the legal department, Perplexity is used by a lot of lawyers because you can actually create alerts where it will actually get news for you and then return you updates on a particular subject every single day. So if you're tracking trends in a market or something like that, wow, every day when you wake up first thing in the morning, you got a nice little summarized note from Perplexity that tells you that. I have 7 AI apps on my phone. I pay for one of them. And you can figure out which one I pay for. So that's my personal preference, but again, that's because I want to be able to use the more advanced models without paying $10 each for one of those models. So that's just a personal preference. So if you haven't checked out Perplexity, I highly recommend it. It is free to use. You can register it with any Google, Apple account. But as of right now, unless you're building it for your business, you shouldn't be spending more than $10 a month on any of these AI apps, really. Because unless you're using it every single day for multiple things, it's not going to justify it. But I will tell you there are a lot of differences, especially, for example, like with Gemini Gemini is Google's version of ChatGPT. When you pay the $10 a month and you connect that thing to Gmail, it's like its brain gets an upgrade. It can mimic your writing style. You can search for your emails in Gmail and ask questions about it. Again, you are giving an AI access to your life in Gmail. There is obviously concerns related to that, but the app does get smarter. You can do more things with that. Gemini is primarily what I work on simply because it's a lightweight model, and it generates stuff very, very quickly. A lot of what I am doing is what we call zero shot or quick shot, where I'm trying to create something in 1 or 2 tries. I'm not trying to spend like an hour refining to create something. So I try to get what I can in the first shot. Claude is another one. Again, so you have OpenAI, which is funded by Microsoft and OpenAI. Gemini is funded by Google. Claude's funded by Anthropic and Amazon. So if you look at underlying Amazon on a lot of their AWS, you can actually use many of these models in your AWS products. But the ones that are native to this are Claude, and then they have their own too. And then Midjourney is one of the top tier image generation models. If you want to upload a picture and say, make me look like a character from The Simpsons, you're going to get a much better option out of Midjourney. The other problem with Midjourney is it's currently being sued by several entertainment companies for allowing people to create certain images. So, but in terms of quality, being able to create videos, Midjourney is an excellent tool for that. And most of these are all chat interface driven, so you just write in text and it comes back out. Okay. Now I talked about a bunch of different models, so I'm going to kind of break it down. So when I talk about multimodal models, that's what I'm talking about with Perplexity and ChatGPT, where it has an image gen model, a video model, text model, all rolled into like one app. So it's called multimodal, meaning it can do multiple things. You'll notice when you use Gemini, if you ask it to make text or ask it to do anything other than text, it's going to call something called Nano Banana, which is its very lightweight generation engine, so it can quickly create products. But you can choose in the option to pick a model and for it to spend more time on it. So text models, again, these ChatGPT, Meta's Llama, Anthropic image models, and then for Google we have Veo. We also have Pika, Sora, and a lot of these are embedded within like the Gemini app, embedded within ChatGPT. So you won't actually call that model specifically. It will call it when you ask for an image. It will call it when you ask for a video. Okay. Now, I've used this word prompt a ton of times. What is a prompt? A prompt is the input you provide to the model to elicit a response. Now, that could be something as simple as image of a bat, image of a cake. What is today's date? Convert kilograms to pounds. Basically, a lot of the stuff that people would use Google for today. These are basic prompts. Now, the structure of this, because I come from a software design, I like to always say this. The best way to start for a prompt is a design that looks like this. As a librarian, I want to write a social media post so that I can increase engagement of people who follow the library on social media. As a, I want to, so that. As a, I want to, so that. If you start framing your prompts, and don't just jump into a model. I write everything in Notepad or TextPad first so that I can create it, so that I'm constantly copying and pasting it from the model to change it as I adjust. But that's a very good way to start. Now, you can simply just be like, create an image that says store closed today, and it will do that. I mean, you can do a simple prompt like that. But if you want something context specific, like we'll talk about like career advice, like a good way to do that for an example would be, as a recruiter with 10 years of experience in the financial services industry, evaluate the attached resume for strengths and weaknesses against the following job description, copy-paste job description. Your brain has already figured out that's what you probably want to do. You just never would have thought to put that all together in one, I like to call it magic spell, to suddenly get all of it created all at once. But that's the difference between prompt engineering and just simply chatting, is being able to engineer the question so that you get the best answer in the fewest number of tries with the least amount of hallucination. So providing context, a good way, there's, if you know on the keyboard, you can use a hyphen or you can use the little asterisk to separate the text that you want it to do from what you're actually uploading as your example. That's how I do it. And I'll show you in a couple examples how I do that. But it's an iterative process. Sometimes you will get stuff right the first time. Sometimes the first time will be utter garbage. Guess what? You just learned how to create utter garbage. So you can learn how to, hopefully in the future, not create more garbage. But again, it's multi-turn. It's okay if you feel like you're talking to yourself, because you kind of are. Okay? Don't feel weird. We all feel weird. But it's not a person. You don't have to be nice to it. Tell it what you want. Like, I can't tell you how many times where I say, that sucks. Or I just say, that wasn't great. Or try again. Because whatever it produced just wasn't good. And that's, so before I jump in and I start talking about pointers, I want to do a little quick demo. Now, hopefully all of these things are still logged in and it's not going to prompt me to do login. Okay, so earlier today, we're just going to be really fun. So I decided I wanted to write a rap about the Dover Public Library. Okay? So, given Eminem is my favorite rapper, one of my favorite artists, I decided to have it write a rap about the Dover Public Library. Okay? Now, I already can tell I hate the way my voice sounds, so I don't want it to be my voice in that video. So what I did here is I wrote, in the style of Eminem, clean radio, because it's a library and I don't want it to just get creative. Write a rap about how cool the Dover Public Library is. So it creates this here. Now, how many of you have ever heard of an app called Loudly? Probably not, right? Loudly is an audio music generation app. So in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, okay. So like I said, asterisk, that's how I used to separate what it is from what I'm copying and pasting. Now see, we did this earlier today, and it didn't reject it for copyright. It actually generated an entire song. But I did it again. The model suddenly remembered that Eminem's a rapper that might sue them. So all of a sudden, it doesn't allow me to now input a thing for that. This is why I was saying, I'm glad it did that. I literally ran this 30 minutes ago. It generated an entire song. And now it won't do anything. So we'll see if it does this now. So what it did was it told me it was a copyright and then edited my prompt so it no longer violated the copyright. I'm a big fan of the Scrooge McDuck theory, work smarter, not harder. And there's a lot you can do with AI. So you can see what it's doing is it's actually going through, it's generating the intro, generating the verse, generating the pre-chorus, and it will go through and it will generate the entire thing. It will lay a track behind it. It will generate audio for it. Now, if you're somebody that, for example, has to do presentations and videos and you hate your own voice, you can always just put the text in here and have it do the audio narration for you and then layer it on top, which I found out that my lovely AV partner has already been doing, just not with this. So it's one of those things where the more you interact with other people that use AI, the more kind of tools and tricks that you find. So it's almost all the way through. And then I will play this cringe-worthy song that it just generated. it to do background vocals, but it made stuff up.
Listen up. Yo.
There's a podcast that I listen to called Last Week in AI. Every single week, the song is a new AI-generated song that talks about news from the week in AI. But if you're somebody who wants to get creative, that can't afford to go into a sound lab and do this, and you got a kid that's really, really into writing his own lyrics, this is free. You can play with this. But it shows people what's possible. Because in today, you no longer need that whole recording studio to knock that out. You no longer need, somebody and a mentor to do that. You can get in here, start experimenting, start grinding, and produce something really high quality. The stuff that my kids produce for our CTE competitions in this state are very impressive. And they're using tons of different AI tools. This is something that I just discovered a couple days ago, was this Loudly app. Because obviously I work in bank and finance, so I don't get a lot of opportunities to generate music. So I figured I would try that. I'm gonna have it do, but when I first started in banking, we had this thing called Life of a Check. So I'm eventually gonna have it make a video called Life of a Check, so I can confuse the next generation since they don't know what checks are. But it just gives you, but this is an example. So what you just saw me do is also called AI aggregation. I wrote the script in one app, went over to another app that can do a different thing, copy and paste it, run it. Another thing that I like to do when it comes to this, so you saw how, so for this, I'm gonna say create since I'm here with my library peeps, I'm going to do the Library of Alexandria, which was a library in Egypt that was burned to the ground. If you ever happen to join a Zoom meeting with me, my current is what Lex Luthor's office would look like as a Zoom wallpaper. I have Batman's office, I have Arkham Asylum. Not bad for a first shot. Now, one of the things that I would like for it to do is write, but don't run. When you don't know what to write, ask it to write the prompt for you. Copy, paste, edit. This is how kids write code now. Copy, paste, edit, run, fail, try again. Copy, paste, edit, run, fail, try again. Yes, it's a lot of trial and error, but there's a lot of education that happens during the trial and error. So you saw how many people in here would have definitely not wrote something that long to try to create an image prompt? Okay. Who would have considered the landscape option? Now, when I tried to do this a month and a half ago, I had to explain to it what Zoom wallpaper meant, because it just kept creating wallpapers of fast cars. Okay, I had to explain that a Zoom wallpaper is an image where you should assume that the center third of the picture will be overlaid by a human being, so it should not be the primary focus of the image. Again, but once I did that, and then you can do things like, the other reason why sometimes you may want to pay for it is you can say things like, you can tell it to remember things about you. So, like for example, if I'm somebody who wears different hats, in my Gemini, I have it saved in my personal context settings, all of the things that I want it to do or not do. So if I get, like this, I'm a data-driven technologist. In future responses, be less sarcastic. I am 42 years old. My preferred style is this, nerdy with hints of sarcasm, satire, and dark humor, but the message should still be understandable. So things like that. So I want it to produce a certain type of content when I'm doing it. So I continually go through and, do you have a question? I'm sorry, just want to make sure. So when you go through, so like for example, sorry, you have a question? What's up?
So my question was that you mentioned earlier how you told it what Zoom was and how it was to apply. Have you ever encountered an issue with it rejecting what you're saying to apply what it already knows or what it assumes it knows?
No, it's pretty complicit. It'll agree with whatever you say to a certain degree. But whether it will remember that the next time it generates, it never did. It eventually took me having to just copy and paste the first like 1 or 2 lines of the prompt. And then they eventually updated the model to when I say Zoom wallpaper, it does a pretty good job of creating something 16 by 9 that's like in landscape view, not portrait view, and goes from there. I have seen things where, like you just saw the thing that I did where I tried to run the initial prompt and it mentioned an artist in there. The first time we ran this before I logged in, it just generated it without a problem. The second time, it suddenly remembered. And there are some hilarious terminology in the AI world. That is what it's called, catastrophic forgetting, which is where the model completely forgets a key tenet of what it's supposed to do or how it's supposed to operate. Again, a good example would be the tool that's currently on X that's getting a lot of flack because it allows you to undress somebody and show you what somebody would look like in a bathing suit. Again, that already violates Delaware's deepfake laws. So anybody posts that about a politician, they're potentially eligible for a felony in the state of Delaware. So it's important, that's why this ethics privacy conversation needs to happen. We go back to Jurassic Park. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And there are reasons why you would want this. Like when you wanted to do x-rays, yes, maybe I would, but that's a different type of x-ray. I would like it to see underlying things underneath and be able to drill down, not just create some stylized view of what you think this person might look like. And to me, that is not a good use of resources training something, but it does get you a lot of clicks and get you a lot of engagement on social media. So again, tools will come, tools will go. You have to kind of make your own decision about what you want to use it for. But again, if you have feedback that you don't like this, you don't think companies should do this, you should be telling your state senator and your state representative about it, because they will listen and they will put legislation forward. Like we're talking about what is called a murder bot bill, which is potentially a bill that ensures that whoever is operating a robot, if you use lethal force on it, the manufacturer is not liable, the operator is. Even if it goes awry, they are 100% accountable. Under Delaware code, it's a gap. So if you have a drone and you're driving a drone around on the beach and it crashes into a couple laying on the beach, right now, who do you sue? The person who was operating it or the manufacturer? No one knows. So laws got to be updated to deal with those kind of things. That's one example of that. Just going to show you another one before I jump in. So this is another fun thing to play with. This is called lovable.dev. So in this one, I'm going to say, since we in Eagles country, now this is a terrible prompt. This is a generative AI that creates entire websites and software applications. So you will see as it goes through, it's actually going to construct and not just build one website, it's actually going to build multiple pages as it goes through. So it's editing. While we're doing that, come over here. Now you heard me mention about one of the reasons Perplexity is so you can replay it. So they have this little button here where you click rerun or redo, And you can actually select from different models. So now I'm going to try to run this with Gemini 3 Flash. So this one, Perplexity actually shows you its sources as it goes through in its thinking. So you can click on it to make sure it doesn't make stuff up. It is absolutely 100% true. ChatGPT and other apps will make up their own sources, or they will quote the homepage of a website as though it actually had information you needed on it. But it will just randomly insert a citation for a website. But you can see on here, I ran the same prompt again using Gemini, and I got, look at this. So it created the prompt, and then it educated me about what to include in it. Yep.
Who's behind
Perplexity.
Okay, so there's
No. They were one of the first companies to say, we'll have our own little lightweight model, but we're going to try to find a way to allow everybody to use whatever model they want. And most corporations are following a model like this, building what's called an AI aggregator app. That's what we have at JP Morgan. So at JP Morgan, we have an app called LLM Suite, which we don't have anywhere near this many that Perplexity has, because we have to clear them one at a time. But our LLM model that we use at JP Morgan, I can put confidential data in. It's a black box. There's nobody, not even the developers, can see what I wrote in that thing, where it's a true black box. And you can build stuff that way. But as a general rule, you should assume that whatever you're building isn't going to be black box, and that anybody's going to be able to review anything you put in there. Again, that's one of the reasons why I'm pushing for a K-12 aggregator app, so that it's centralized, and then because nobody wants stuff from like your kid's IEP going into an AI tool. Same thing with like social services and things like that. You don't want all that information going into an AI tool unless it's closed in-house that nobody else can access. All right, so I'm going to flip back, just kind of go through a couple other. So we talked what a prompt is. So prompt engineering. By attending this class today, you are all participating in prompt engineering. You're learning about the right and wrong ways to build prompts to get good outputs out of a large language model or a generative AI tool. And I'll talk about hallucinations here in a second. Again, these are different ways that you can actually use this. So we talked about a couple of these. So with language and text generation, you can use ChatGPT as a chatbot. So like I do it all the time, where I'll copy and paste a SQL statement that I'm trying to use in a database and say, fix my SQL. I will also go into Excel, be like, give me an Excel formula that combines cell B1 and cell C2 and makes it into one number. It'll do that. It will give you literal, so if I were to say, enter in a prompt and say, give me a formula, it will give me a nice little thing that I can copy and paste neatly into Excel. It doesn't just answer the question, it gives you the output in a way that's easy to retrieve and enter and insert wherever you want to go. Summarization is really, really good for this. Like a lot of times I'll tell ChatGPT, explain it like I'm 5, explain it like a 5th grader. Or I'll say things like, I read this book 10 years ago. Can you please summarize the top 10 points from this book that I can include in a Power presentation when I mention it? And then I'll create a second prompt to create a PowerPoint slide for it, and then I'll edit the slide in PowerPoint. I'll be honest, there are a lot of people that use it for PowerPoint generation. I'm way too picky about my PowerPoints to let the AI do it, and I end up doing way more editing than I would be if I just created it myself. So I'll, a lot of times, have this up, creating content in it and designing it in PowerPoint myself, because I was trained in layout and things like that, and I'm better and I'm more comfortable with that. Now, somebody who's not comfortable in PowerPoint, that doesn't know what all the functions are, may want them to go ahead and generate the entire thing from scratch and just have you update it. It depends on where you think you should be spending your time. A lot of prompt generation is figuring out what you want to spend your time on. There's some things I just don't want to be spending any of my time on, so I'm going to do that. Like one thing that I did, a good example of a really complicated text prompt. So I had a list of kids that came in first, second, and third place for my competition. I wanted to write personalized congratulations to every single one of those students. There was 142 students, if I would have done all of them. There is nobody in this room who can justify that amount of time to their boss, right? Just to write thank you notes to kids. So you know what I did? Hey, ChatGPT, generate a personalized congratulations to each of the kids on the following list, mention their award, mention their place, and give them positive reinforcement about how that's going to help them in a job. Run. And you know how long it took me? 8 minutes of copy, paste, send, copy, paste, send, copy, paste, send. But I did 140 personalized thank yous in 8 minutes. Some people can say that's cheating. Other people would say you're getting a lot done with a lot less time. Simple things like that. Like when I need to write to return something, if I need to reach out to a state representative or state senator, I'm using it to write the emails, at least the first draft. Like I like to say that generative AI is very good from getting you from 0 to 70% complete in 7 seconds, so that you can actually spend 70% or more of your time on the final draft versus the first draft. And that's really what it is. It's like a tool in a toolbox, but you wouldn't use a screwdriver to cut down a tree. So the right tool for the right scenario is what matters. Image generation, again, be specific. The more specific you are, the better. If you don't know what to create, tell it to write but don't run, and have it actually generate the full prompt for you. A lot of times what I'll do when I'm creating content, like for PowerPoint, like if you saw the initial image on my first slide of my PowerPoint was AI generated. Most of the content in my PowerPoints are AI generated. Mostly because I don't have to worry about copywriting somebody else's image if I'm presenting it publicly. The other reason is because I can make it so that that image actually accompanies the content. So I'll say, create an image to accompany the following text in a PowerPoint slide. Sometimes it creates an image of the text, which is not what I want it to do. Or sometimes it actually does what it needs to do. Like for AI in manufacturing, I had it create a bunch of manufacturing diagrams and things like that. Because again, I didn't want to use clip art. I'm one of those people who hate when you're in someone in PowerPoint and they use a clip art that's all zoomed out and all pixelated, and I'm like, just take a new picture. That's just my personal preference. I like using high quality images as I'm going through. But again, there's no right or wrong way to design a prompt. It's how much time do you want to spend to get the right output. The more time you put up front getting it, or the more time you spend on the back end refining it, the better off your output's going to be either way. It's just a matter of set goals for your prompt, write it, and test it against multiple models. When I run things on my phone, I will run it in one, copy, because all of them now have a copy function. So you can literally do it in one app, hit copy, jump to the next app, run it, jump to the next app, run it again. And literally, on the free version, you can just wait for all 5 to run. And then check the output and pick the one you like the most. Saves you a ton of time versus how much time would you be sitting on Google, going through Google Images, trying to find the exact Google image you want to match it. Even if you knew what to search for in Google Images, it's a time suck. And this is one of the things, like when we talk about AI and education nowadays, it's going to require a reset on how people approach problems. You know, when it's not so much about recall anymore as it's about being able to understand the process of discovery. The actual, and the scientific method is now more relevant than it ever has with this stuff. Because it's literally develop a hypothesis, test it, analyze result, repeat. And that's a lot of what this is. And again, as I mentioned, there's objective and instruction, so that as a, I want to, so that. The ideal prompt needs to include at least 2 parts. Some kind of an objective and an instruction on what it needs to do. There are a ton of other things that you can add to it as well. So now that I've shown you a bunch of different things, now I'm going to give you actual things that you can use in your prompts to make them better. So for example, giving it instructions, like saying, you are a coding expert that specializes in rendering code. How is that different from write code? Ask a developer, there's such thing as good code and bad code, elegant code and sloppy code. That's why you want to preface it and give it actual instructions. So you want it to write good, elegant code that is easy to maintain versus just writing code that works. It might work, but it might be the slowest runtime possible, and it's not going to work for your application. You know, again, that add a role in there, like as a veteran, as a member of the AI Commission with 20 years in banking and finance experience, talk about why this particular issue needs to be investigated, things like that. Actually add in like the persona in there. Put constraints in. Like I said on there, write but don't run. That's a constraint. Another thing is, one of the things that you can do in an AI app is say, do not hallucinate, which means if you can't come up with the right answer, don't guess. And you can actually make it more explicit in what it actually produces. Sometimes it works every time, sometimes it doesn't. And that's, again, why you're seeing a lot of companies are suddenly trying out all kinds of different models. Because every time someone makes a change to a model, you got to reevaluate if you need to rewrite everything you just did. Because it's not like regular software where everything is static. Again, tone, I'm very much like in this excited manner, or I'll describe what my audience is, like for a high school diploma audience. For my favorite is write an email to my boss who prefers to only answer with single words so that I can elicit a direct yes to the following question. You laugh, but it works, especially when you're asking for budget approval of stuff. All you want is one word, and doesn't begin with N. But again, it makes a big difference. Like I will literally write in there, write a note to my senator who, although he says he is an engineer, he does not technically understand AI, so break down those concepts and relate them back to stuff in mechanical engineering. All it's doing is increasing the likelihood that my message is going to be received successfully. It's increasing the likelihood that what I'm doing works. And again, we can break these down, but be clear. Structure the prompts. Use examples. Set limits. Simplify. All this stuff probably in your head sounds common sense. Like you would do this. Just having the presence of mind to do that. But approaching everything you do in AI as an exploration, not just as, sometimes you're going to come in there and you're going to get the first shot on the first try. Other times it's going to take you a lot. Sometimes I get frustrated and I walk away. Like especially with image generation or if I'm trying to have it create a message. My favorite thing is write a 1-minute public comment for blah blah committee on X topic articulating the following stance. And then if I really wanted to, I could generate my own audio so that I wouldn't have to talk in that meeting and it would just say it out loud. Again, how you use it depends on your life. But the more you experiment with it, the more you play, the more you're not afraid of it, the more you're going to get out of it. It's going to make your life easier. I mean, I can tell you on an average day at work, I probably use my LLM suite somewhere between 10 and 30 times every day. And it makes me more accurate. It makes me more precise. It makes me more creative. And it generally helps me be a better partner, a better team player, and a better product owner too. I know we're getting a little short on time, but I just kind of want to talk about hallucinations real quick. So we're going to get a little meta. So why do hallucinations happen? Training data limitations, patterns, matching it doesn't understand, bad data. This is like a while ago you saw I think Microsoft tried to create a chat bot and trained it on Twitter, and then it started spouting hate speech after about 20 minutes and they had to turn it off, trained on bad data. So hallucinations are what happens when the model does something other than what you put. So I asked it to create a hallucination image about hallucinations. So if you look at that image, initially it kind of looks okay, but it spelled the word hallucination 3 different ways. It can't spell plausible right. It can't spell factually right. It created some little speech bubble thing. I don't quite know what that is. And you'll see that. The fastest way to lose an audience is to build AI slop. And that, honestly, if one of the other key takeaways from today is you should always be QAing your output, always reviewing it, and have somebody else look at it, especially if it's going to go in a presentation. Because if I would have shared that, I would have been very, very embarrassed to have that in a PowerPoint presentation. But I mean, that's an example of just where it goes off, and you'll see that. I've seen teachers now who hide one little line of text at 1-point font. So when the kid copies and pastes it into the AI, it tells them something about bananas or coconuts or something. So it poisons the output. So just keep that in mind when you're going through this. Always be aware that the AI can make a mistake. Failure is always an option. So you should always make sure you review your outputs before you send it. And again, I'll send all these out, but these are links to a lot of the stuff that I talked about today. So video generation, Synthesia, InVideo, Deep AI, music generators. Loudly is the one that I did today. And there's Sound Draw, Song Generator. There's a ton of different AI apps. And there's more getting created every day. But the big thing is don't pay for something if it's just something else in a wrapper. If somebody's just putting ChatGPT and using it for a niche, because you probably could buy a general use tool and get a subscription for that and save yourself a lot of money and get a lot more utility out of it. There is a lot of garbage apps on the App Store right now that are just basically ChatGPT in a wrapper and nothing else. So just be careful about spending any money. Always use it. Play with the free version first. And if somebody doesn't want to give you the free version outright, that's not necessarily an indication that it's a scam, but you should be wary of it. Because most of them want you to try your model and then they'll cut you off after 3 or 4 prompts, so then you get more daily allotment. Okay. Last but not least, that pretty much covers everything that we were going today. So we're right at 1:15. I'm not going to hold you any later, but I'll take any questions. I'd love to hear feedback if anybody has it. Was this helpful today? Did I tell you stuff you hadn't heard before? Okay, great. Go ahead.
So at one point you had mentioned about write but don't run. What do you mean by that?
So like for example, a lot of times when you say write a prompt to generate an image, sometimes it will just generate the image. So it will skip the writing out the text first before you submit it to run and just run and create the image. Because it's trying to be intuitive, but it's being too intuitive. So that's why I say when I want to actually see the text before it gets run, I'll say write, but don't run a prompt containing this. So then I can copy, paste that, edit it, and rerun it. It's just a way to stop the model from trying to assume that it wants me to go ahead and jump to the image creation step. Okay? Go ahead.
I want to write an app, and I put in and say I want to do an app like this. So I want the code, not have it run the app. Which is
Well, what it will do is it generally when it depends on if you're looking for a snippet of code or you want to generate the entire program. If you're generating the entire program, it's going to generate that. But if you want, you can actually, like in Claude, for example, you could copy and paste a section of code and say evaluate this code for completeness or and make sure that it will run and don't actually run it. You can do that. You just have to specify the constraint of evaluate but do not execute. Now depending on which version it is, it may not by default execute the code. But again, if you're generating an entire app, build the entire app first and then start analyzing the code so that it's more deployable. Because when you go to export that, you'll run into challenges you'll have to overcome just like any other software deployment. But there's nothing wrong with literally taking bits and pieces of that same code, running it through another model to optimize it before you deploy it. Okay? Yep.
Is there any standard, like you would put that in parentheses, that, don't run, right? Is that any kind of standard?
Like I said, I use anything like slashes, hyphens, asterisks, anything that's a straight special character. that can't be interpreted as part of something else, you can use those as delimiters or dividers between the prompt and the actual example text or the context that you're giving it. And do it that way, absolutely. Anyone else? Alta?
Yeah, you were running a website for the Eagles. Are you able to show it?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. Error. So that's the other thing that it will do. Some of these tools will check if you leave the page and kill the routine when you leave the page. Like if I go to another tab and I don't come back, it will actually have a counter of like 10 seconds and will kill it, so that it's not using energy and resources if you're not paying attention. Because think about it, you could theoretically put a bot that would go on the website and just literally blow through tons of bandwidth by entering one after the other after the other. Let's try, I'm not gonna try it. I mean, we're finished for today, but I'll try it again if anyone wants to see it. But you're welcome to, if you need to go. So you can see what it's doing, where it's creating the schema, and then it's creating the file system. And then it's going to fill in the file system based on the data it created. When I did this in our first workshop, I did a Taylor Swift fan club website. And the first thing somebody said to me was, "That's not her latest album on the front page." And I said, okay, I did not know that, but okay. So because apparently it did not have Taylor Swift's latest album in its data banks, so it just grabbed the one that was beforehand. Yeah, so you can see what it's doing is it's actually creating the individual web pages now.
After it creates the website, how does it go live?
You can pay Audible to deploy it for you. I mean, pay Lovable, and they'll actually deploy it for you as is. Or you can export the code and import it into your desktop and run it that way.
Okay. Is it for the code that it puts in? Like, have you ever noticed or anyone ever complained about it being like depending on the database you try to use it for, or the domain you use it for, platform? Like if you're using like Wix or using WordPress, like is there any limitations? Have you noticed between those?
I mean, I haven't really noticed it, but then again, what I've seen most people do is the people that used to use Wix use this now. Yeah. And they just pay for the service and have it deploy it themselves, because then they can store it on their servers, they can manage everything through here, and then if it goes down, they've got somebody else to yell at, versus having to pay for a separate hosting provider that would do all that for them. I mean, I've generated some, like I've done like a finger scan, like a fingerprint verification app, and some of the other things on here with it. Sometimes the code is elegant, sometimes it's a little wordy. It really depends. I'm sure if I spent more time giving it explicit instructions about what classes to create and what components, it probably would have been a little bit better. But again, I just created it macro. So now what it's doing is it's creating all the different elements. There's the entire website it just built. It actually loaded real-time statistics in there for the game too, apparently. It actually grabbed local telemetry data to grab local restaurants to add in here for watch parties. So we've been spending the past decade telling our kids to learn to code, and then we give them AI that can do all of it for them. Now, the reason kids still need to learn how to code is you need to learn good code from bad code. And you need to learn how to maintain it because sometimes the AI can't tell you why it broke, and you have to figure it out. And that's the big thing that we see now is we see guys that are really great at building stuff, really horrible at maintaining it. Because they can build it but then when they've got to figure out when something breaks and the chat won't tell them immediately how it broke, then all of a sudden you got the senior dev guys coming in doing that too. So it's a trade-off. But thank you everybody for coming today. Please again provide feedback on this. If you have suggestions for future topics, we'd love to hear it. And next month we'll be at the Route 9 Library talking about audio and deepfakes. Thank you very much for your time.